professor for migration and society and a coordinator, and a co-director of the Institute for Migration Research and Intercultural Studies at the University of Osnabrueck, Germany. She's in the team of coordinators for the Global Research Network for Domestic Workers' Rights, and her research focuses on labor migration, gender and migration, social movement studies, and labor organizing. Please.
Thanks a lot, and I'm very happy to speak in this round because the presentation fits very well to what Russell has presented, and also yesterday evening's sharing of the experiences of the Filipino workers here. And I would like to share some ideas in the conclusion, maybe how to think about these issues, and also maybe to shift the framing a little bit. No, this is not just this one. No. Okay, so this is shared or a collaborative work of many people around the world. So since 2007, within the framework of the Global Labor University and also the Global Network for Domestic Workers' Rights, we produced a lot of case studies and thought how domestic workers organizing has changed over the years, in particular also due to what we can call with McCallum a governance struggle, which is the struggle for the International Labour Organization's Convention for Domestic Workers' Rights. Because this has changed, to take Manush's words, also the subjectivities of the workers, from domestics to domestic workers, with an emphasis on a labour rights framework. So I would like to ask the question, not whether domestic workers can organize, but how they do it and which powers they mobilize for organizing. So this is, the powers is very, like the concept is really, refers to a long discussion or in labor studies, like Beverly Silver, for example's work, or Eric Olin Wright's work, on different powers that need to be developed to successfully unionize and organize. And I will explain a little later. So what we found out is that what Shirin Ali, a South African colleague, identified in the early 2000s as two modes of organizing, that is a union model and an associational model, is not true any longer, but that we see a shift towards a so-called hybrid model. And I will explain what it is. Because we think that domestic workers not any longer exclusively organize either in trade unions or in NGO type or self-help organizations, but in between. And this grants them specific forms of power. But what is often neglected is this link to the emotional level. And we saw that yesterday as well in the organizing of the workers we talked to. Because when organizing exclusively in trade unions, the focus is mainly on labor rights and these issues. It's often quite technical. But what is also necessary is an emotional solidarity as a form of social power. And here comes together this emotional level with the governance struggle and the legal or institutional power. So I'm not a lawyer, but a social scientist, so we'll see what you think about it. So to delve a little bit into the theoretical concept, you don't need to read everything, but this is kind of what is currently discussed in also the trade union renewal literature, that it is that different sources of power matter, and that the kind of workers Manush was talking about, or that Inga was talking about, or domestic workers, they often lack structural power, which is that, for example, a strike, like who takes notice of when a domestic worker strikes? Well, it's difficult for the individual family, but, well, life goes on. So this is hardly possible. But associational and institutional powers matter quite a bit because the associational power is about coming together as workers and developing strength. And this has been in like the more traditional type of industry or of industry relations been the form of trade unions and also workers' parties. We know they're all on decline. So in recent years, more emphasis has been put on the institutional power perspective tied to societal power, and what I call, like in this work is also this struggle or the advocacy struggle for instruments like the ILO Convention. Someone said it, like, how important is law at all? I would say in this respect, law is not so important, but it provided the grounds for strong moral arguments. And not only moral arguments, but a framing of the issue as a labor issue. And also, I think now I got confused who said it, but like in many, or Russell said it, like in many countries that they did not ratify the ILO Convention, but they passed laws, quite some laws in many, many countries. So these issues become more and more important, so different sources of labor power. But so far the literature very much rests in this, on the one hand, union model, industrial relations type of thinking, and on the other hand, it's more about social movement way of thinking, or like women's groups, empowerment literature, focusing on associational models with groups of women coming together. But what I will show is that a third type, the hybrid model, becomes more important. And this is, I will explain how it looks like. And there is a trend towards an emerging union model, as we say, which is a new interest of also associations of domestic workers in trade union policies. For a long time, this was considered unsexy, unimportant, well, not really relevant, maybe also because of other frameworks like trafficking, which became more important in the sphere of domestic work. But this is really a counter movement to rediscover the strength of trade unions. And here we see the ideal type of a hybrid model, Hong Kong, where most domestic workers are migrants. The unions were not really interested in the migrants and the domestic workers for a long time, but this changed quite a bit. And the setup is that there are a lot of small groups of domestic workers from one country or one language, one ethnicity. They organize it within this group, provide support, provide mutual aid, share stories, sing together, celebrate together, and they have kind of a delegate system and a link to the bigger trade union. And they also get representation within the trade union. That is very important, that the trade union is not looking only for new members, but really offering a space also for these associations. And they take the association's work really serious and not just say, oh, well, this is a meeting of women sitting around and drinking tea or coffee, but considering this as a form of organizing. So this model got exported, one could say, for example, to the Netherlands, where with explicit reference to the Hong Kong case, the trade unions restructured their work with domestic workers. So, well, with all difficulties to organize this precarious workforce and also mobile workforce, but what we also see is that there are these different 5 to 6 language group-based organizations and a trade union that is welcoming them, that provides them with like voting rights also in the cleaners parliament and things like that. So these are just two examples. What we did in our research project is to try to develop a global mapping of how the field has developed over the past decade. And we can discuss each case, but I'm not 100% sure whether every country is dotted in the really correct way. But what we can see is that this is today's situation. You see a lot of organizations on the top right or moving there. And 10 years earlier, this would have looked different. So there have been quite a lot of changes. So to explain it, here we have on the left side the associational model. So, and on the right side, trade unions of domestic workers and also the hybrids. And on the left, we see the social power dimension, which we use as a proxy for relevance. It is so difficult to talk about this in quantitative terms. So what does it mean? How many domestic workers are organized? Do they really fought through a law? Very, very difficult. And but we thought this social power measures it a little bit. So now I come to the issue or the relevance of emotional solidarity and why we need this hybrid model to understand what is going on. And this lies in the reasons for domestic workers organizing. And here we see that it is very, very important not only to have strategic litigation or counseling in terms of labor law, what trade unions can really offer. But the companionship, the sharing of experience is so important. Also to share workplace issues or common stories of exploitation, which is maybe not an issue in other not so safe spaces. But trade unions tend to emphasize on these legal services or negotiating contracts and so on. So we have this issue of recognition and emotional solidarity, which is very important. And also to take that to the case of the United Children of Israel yesterday, one could, this is obviously not a labor rights organization or association, not yet maybe, because one could change also the framing. Like yesterday it was portrayed that it is like an individual and collective tragedy that the children are reported. But you could also say it is a labor issue because of the labor contract system in Israel. And so this needs to be changed. However, this is not an issue that can be solved within 3 weeks until the deportation orders are executed. So for the moment, this, the moral argument, children, is maybe the stronger and the more successful one. But in the long term, to also emphasize more on the structural issues and maybe to find also other allies. Maybe trade unions could be an ally and the Workers' Party, I don't know. I'm not familiar with Israeli context, how important this is any longer. But another issue, yesterday I had the impression that the workers take back themselves. They say it's not for us, it's for our children. And if we use like this form of organizing, the hybrid model, and also a rights-based approach, you could say, well, it can also be for you, it's about the working conditions. So this is a larger issue. I'm very interested in hearing and following what happens to the group of workers. And also whether it maybe develops into an organization that takes up more issues. So what we see here is, like, I would say, a global trend to an emerging trade unionism, with all the fights involved with many trade unions, but also with a lot of recognition that has been developed over the past decade. A feature that is very important is the autonomy of these associations, so that the trade unions do not interfere into like the business of the associations that are linked to the unions. The governance struggle of winning the ILO convention has been a major driving force for this development, and also had an impact on the framing as a labor rights issue. It is a tool that provides legitimacy, and not only in terms of labor rights, but also moral powers. So when we refer to Russell's talk yesterday, morals was more related to morals in the conventional way of thinking, but you could also develop a morality in terms of working conditions, of decent work. So there is also this element maybe to bridge the rights issue and the moral issue. I'm looking forward to discussing this with all of you. Thank you.